Hi and welcome to Coffee Break, the way that we at Ius Laboris keep you up to date with current employment trends. Today we're going to talk about pay transparency. My name's David Lorimer, I'm a partner in Lewis Silkin at GB, and I'm delighted to be joined by my partner Síobhra Rush from Lewis Silkin, Ireland.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
So it's top of all of our inboxes. I'm sure it's top of all of our clients' inbox as well, and they're being spammed no end about the PTD, as we're calling it. Let's start with a couple of the kind of topical themes that are coming up, Síobhra, and the first one is the kind of collectivism. Now, obviously, kind of collective elements of employment law aren't a stranger to some of our colleagues across Europe, but that's less the case in Ireland, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and you're right that we're seeing Pay Transparency Directive queries come in a lot more. Obviously, the directive was passed last year. It has to be implemented by 2026, so clients and employers are becoming very live to the requirements, and collectivism, I suppose, is more of a hotter topic for me because I'm in a jurisdiction where we don't have works councils, very little trade union representation in the working population, and really employee reps are nominated for the purposes of health and safety or for transfer of undertaking, so where businesses move and employees go with them, and in collective redundancy situations. But in both of the latter two, employee reps are only nominated for 30 days, whereas what is envisaged by the Pay Transparency Directive is that there would be I don't really know whether it's an existing body or continuous representation that will work with the employer where required, or consult or agree, depending on how it is implemented in Ireland, around various aspects of the employer obligations and employee rights. So yeah, that's one I'm definitely looking at with great interest.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I guess quite a lot of clients we're working with are saying, right, we're 1 year out, we want to get ahead on comms and we want to get people ready. But of course, for places like Ireland and other places where there isn't a standing Works Council or CSE or equivalent, you've got to kind of spin up that body and try and meet the directive on that ahead of doing that engagement.
Yeah, but also I suppose, and we have seen it way more, say, maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, where reps have been nominated for the purposes of TUPE and for collective redundancy, where they've looked for training, they've been much more active about what their role involves. For pay transparency, because the gender pay gap reporting, for instance, it's quite technical, a lot of statistics. There will be a requirement to, I suppose, and I think it would be easier for employers if they do training and educate their reps on what it involves, just to make sure that the reps know what they're doing and feel that they can do a good job. So yeah, way more interaction than what we would normally see in Ireland and potentially other jurisdictions around Europe.
Yeah, it's a really good point. At least to be having a discussion with a more informed rep is going to help, isn't it? Okay, well that kind of brings us on nicely in terms of the difference between Ireland and maybe some of the other European jurisdictions to what we're seeing on implementation. So our hope when we saw the directive, which actually has quite a lot of detail in there already, is that we're headed for a harmonised system. We're starting to see some drafts come out, aren't we? And are we looking at a patchwork, or what are we seeing generally as the themes?
I think that kind of between the legislature and then obviously clients who we're helping out who have operations in different jurisdictions, they also want to do it as uniformly as possible and only tweak whatever they need to do to comply with local law, but overall a broad umbrella of how they're going to comply with the Pay Transparency Directive. Very few countries have actually implemented, so I know that in Netherlands they're probably the furthest ahead, but even that draft legislation probably isn't without problems, and I think they're in a consultation stage around that. But for instance, the requirement to where you have a pay gap that's more than 5% in a category, and you can't mend that, say, within, or you can't objectively justify it and then mend it within 6 months, you're subject to a joint pay assessment with a view to reducing that gap. The Netherlands are proposing that it would actually be reduce the gap to 0 as opposed to below the 5% threshold. That's quite significant. And then also there may be discrepancies between how countries view what's included in pay, and that was something that was quite unclear, for instance, when we brought in our gender pay gap regulations in Ireland. Ireland's a bit ahead in terms of, we have a draft heads of bill which is kind of pre-legislative, but it is about the two requirements to provide pay ranges And in fact, we've gone further to say that they must be published when the job advertisement is published, and then also the ban on pay secrecy. So again, we might see a divergence between how countries are dealing with it, because it doesn't look like Ireland is going to just implement the directive in one go. There might be a couple of stages where they bring regulations in to implement different parts of the directive. So it's again something that we're keeping an eye on for clients, because they do want to be as uniform where they have a presence in a number of EU jurisdictions.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of that kind of detail come out, aren't we? Even last week, I think France published a report into what they might need to do to their existing reporting regime to get it into shape for PTD. So you can see that might look slightly different in other countries as well. So lots to navigate. But I think probably the thing to come back to is, while we wait for this detail to come out and obviously work with clients on thinking about how it changes their plans, or if it changes their plans, there is still enough in the directive already, isn't there, for clients to be getting on with preparing now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so many of our clients do have operations in various different jurisdictions, and it means that they're large enough that they probably have pretty sophisticated HR and job architecture. They may not be categorizing, they probably have various levels and you know, an existing HR architecture within their workforce that lends itself to at least having a look at, you know, how you're categorizing. They've probably already been reporting on the gender pay gap in the various jurisdictions as well. So yeah, there's lots of scope for them to make progress, and you know, that's where we're finding our queries. We have people who are coming to us to say, okay, June 2026 is implementation date, let's work back from that. Let's get our stakeholders together, decide how we're going to approach this, and see whether, you know, are we on track to be able to comply with the legislation when it's in these various jurisdictions. Assuming all countries implement by June 2026, that might not be the case. People might be a little bit later, or they might implement, so they might transpose the directive, but actually they might not commence the reporting and the actual law. That's what we saw with the gender pay gap in Ireland for another year or two. So, because I think the France one, they said that it would be in by 2027, maybe that the requirements would be in by 2027. So again, yeah, definite space to watch, but lots of scope for employers to make progress now.
Yeah, and we're running an internal sweepstake, aren't we, about who's going to miss the deadline. So we'll keep our eyes on that for all of you. Now, you mentioned categorization. I think that's a topic that's more suited to a wine break video than a coffee break video.
Very turgid. Yeah, very turgid. And I suppose because it's you know, obviously it's something that we are working with clients on, but everybody's learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thanks very much, Síobhra, for talking us through a lot. We've covered categorization, we've covered the collective elements, and we've covered the elements of pay, all sorts. If you do want some more information, there's lots available on the Ius Laboris website, including an implementation map, which is up to date, so do check that out. Many thanks.